Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Tonight, I'm sharing a story called The Shadow at the Edge of Sleep. It's about a kid in small-town America haunted by nightmares that feel too real, a family hiding secrets, and a creeping sense that someone or something is always watching. This spans years of eerie dreams, unexplained events, and moments that'll make you question what's real. Buckle up, because this one's a slow burn that'll stick with you. I grew up in a quiet corner of Millfield, Ohio, where the streets are lined with maple trees and every house has a porch that creaks in the wind. My name's Ethan Carter, and when I was about 9, something started happening that I still can't fully explain. It was 2013, and life was simple: school, bike rides with my best friend Jake, and sneaking extra cookies when mom wasn't looking. But at night, when the house went still, I started having this dream. Not just any dream, but one that came back like a bad song stuck in your head, maybe once every couple of months. It wasn't the kind of nightmare where monsters chase you. It was worse, subtle, creeping, like a shadow you only notice when it's too late. I'd wake up in the dream, but not really. I'd be floating above my bed, staring down at myself sleeping, like I was a ghost or stuck in some creepy security camera feed. My room looked exactly like it did in real life. Posters of Spider-Man on the walls, my beat-up skateboard leaning against the dresser, the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that barely glowed anymore. But something was always off. The first thing I'd notice was the digital clock on my nightstand. It was one of those red-numbered ones, and in the dream it'd be ticking backward. Not fast, just slow enough to make my stomach twist. I tried to move, to reach for my body below, but I couldn't. My arms felt like they were stuck in molasses, and all I could do was turn my head to scan the room. That's when I'd see the other stuff. There were these drawings taped to the walls, childish scribbles in crayon. Red, blue, yellow, smudged like someone had pressed too hard. They showed a family holding hands, maybe 5 or 6 stick figures, with one smaller one in the middle that I knew was me. They were always standing in front of a house with a red door, which was weird because our house had a green door. I wasn't an artsy kid. I didn't draw, not like that. Yet these pictures felt familiar, like I should remember making them. Once, I saw one on my dresser, half crumpled, with the word home scrawled in messy letters. It gave me chills, like someone else had been in my room, leaving these behind. Then there was my old toy car, a red Mustang I'd lost when I was 6. In the dream, it'd be sitting somewhere random, on the floor by my closet, under the bed, once even on my windowsill. I'd stare at it, trying to figure out how it got there, and that's when the urge would hit. This overwhelming need to look at the window. I didn't want to, but it was like a magnet pulling my eyes. I turned my head, and there he was. A man standing just outside the glass, so close his breath fogged it up. He had dark hair, slicked back, and a faint scar above his right eye, jagged like a lightning bolt. He'd stare at me, not my sleeping body, but me, the me floating above. His eyes were empty, like he was looking through me, and then he'd raise a hand and drag his nails down the window, slow and deliberate, like he was testing if it'd break. That's when I'd wake up, heart pounding so hard I thought it'd burst. I'd lie there, too scared to move, listening for any sound. A creak, a tap, anything. Sometimes I'd muster the courage to check the window, half expecting to see claw marks or a smudge. But there was never anything. Just the quiet street outside, the neighbor's dog barking in the distance, and the moon casting shadows through the trees. The first time it happened, I brushed it off. Kids have nightmares, right? But when it came back a couple of months later, exactly the same: clock, drawings, car, man, I knew this wasn't normal. I was half lucid in these dreams, aware I was dreaming, but that didn't make it less terrifying. If anything, it made it worse, because I couldn't wake myself up no matter how hard I tried. I didn't tell anyone at first. I was 9, and admitting I was scared felt like admitting I wasn't tough. But after the third dream, I couldn't keep it in. I told my mom one morning over breakfast, my voice shaking as I described the man. She listened, stirring her coffee, and said recurring dreams were common for kids my age. "Your brain's just working through something, Ethan," she said, ruffling my hair. My dad, reading the paper, chimed in that they were right down the hall if I needed them. It was comforting for about a day, but the next time the dream hit, their words didn't help. I started wondering if I was going crazy. Why was it always the same? Why did it feel so real? And why did that man's face stick in my head, like I'd seen him before, even though I was sure I hadn't? The dreams kept coming, like clockwork, every 2 or 3 months. I'd wake up gasping. The image of that man's scarred face burned into my mind. By the time I was 10, I'd had the nightmare maybe 5 or 6 times, and it was starting to wear me down. I wasn't sleeping right. I'd lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, afraid to close my eyes in case I'd end up floating above my bed again. School wasn't much better. I'd zone out in math class, doodling that red door house from the drawings in my dream, trying to make sense of it. My teacher, Mrs. Larson, noticed I was off. She pulled me aside one day, asking if everything was okay at home. I mumbled something about being tired and promised to focus, but I could tell she didn't buy it. I didn't want to tell her the truth. How do you explain to your teacher that you're scared of a dream that feels like it's stalking you? One night, after a particularly bad dream, I did something I hadn't done before. It was maybe 2 a.m., and I was too shaken to stay in bed. The man in the dream had been different this time. Not just clawing at the window, but pressing his face against it. His lips moving like he was whispering something I couldn't hear. I grabbed my flashlight and crept downstairs, my bare feet cold against the hardwood. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I needed to do something. I ended up in the backyard, shining the light around the grass under my bedroom window. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and pine from the trees bordering our property. I scanned the ground, half expecting to find nothing, but then I saw it. A faint indentation in the dirt, like the edge of a shoe. It wasn't clear enough to be sure, but it was enough to make my heart race. I knelt down, tracing it with my finger, and noticed a few blades of grass bent nearby, like something heavy had been there. I sat there for a while, the flashlight shaking in my hand, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just Dad's footprint from mowing the lawn. But Dad wore work boots and this looked smaller, narrower. I thought about waking my parents, but I could already hear Mom saying it was my imagination, Dad telling me to go back to bed. So I didn't. Instead, I went back inside and grabbed a notebook from my desk. I started writing down everything I could remember about the dreams, the backward clock, the crayon drawings, the toy car, the man's scar. I even sketched the house with the red door, adding details I hadn't noticed before, like a crooked chimney and a single tree in the yard. Writing it down made it feel more real but also more confusing. Why was my brain doing this to me? Was it just a dream? Or was something actually happening? The next day I was a wreck. Jake noticed at lunch when I barely touched my sandwich. He was the kind of friend who could tell when something was up but wouldn't push too hard. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said, tossing a chip at me. I forced a laugh I wanted to tell him, but I didn't know where to start. Jake lived a few streets over, and we'd been friends since kindergarten. He was the one person I thought might believe me, so I told him a watered-down version. Just the dreams, not the footprint or the man's face. He listened, munching on his chips, and when I finished, he didn't laugh or call me crazy. "That's messed up," he said. "Maybe you're like, psychic or something." I rolled my eyes, but it was the first time I didn't feel completely alone with it. Jake suggested we check out the library after school, look up stuff about dreams. I wasn't sure it'd help, but I agreed, mostly because it gave me something to do besides sit in my room dreading the next nightmare. At the library, we found a dusty book on dream psychology in the back corner. It talked about lucid dreaming and how stress could trigger weird dreams, but nothing about recurring nightmares that felt like memories. I flipped through it, frustrated, while Jake messed around on the computer, Googling weird dreams. He found some forum posts about sleep paralysis and shadow people, which freaked me out more than I wanted to admit. One post described a guy who saw the same figure in his dreams for years, always standing at the edge of his vision. He said it stopped when he moved houses. That stuck with me. Our house in Millfield was the only one I'd ever lived in. What if whatever was causing this was tied to it somehow? That night, I couldn't shake the image of the footprint. I kept thinking about what Jake said. Maybe I was psychic, or maybe something was trying to tell me something. Before bed, I double-checked the window lock, even though I knew it was pointless. As I lay there, I tried to focus on something normal, like the baseball game Dad had on downstairs, the sound of the crowd filtering through the floor. But my mind kept drifting back to the dream, to the man's scar, to the feeling that he wasn't just a figment of my imagination. I didn't sleep much that night, and when I did, I dreamed of the Red Door house again. Only this time, the man was inside, standing in the doorway, watching me. The dreams didn't stop, but I got better at hiding how much they were messing with me. By 11, I'd learned to fake it. Smile at breakfast, laugh at Jake's dumb jokes, act like I wasn't carrying around a knot of dread all the time. But inside, I was unraveling. The nightmares were less frequent now, maybe once every 4 months, but they were sharper, like my brain was honing in on details I'd missed before. The man's scar was clearer, a pinkish-white line that curved like a question mark. The crayon drawings had more details too, smudges around the stick figure's hands, like they were gripping each other tightly, and the Red Door house had a mailbox with a name I couldn't quite read, something starting with a B. I kept adding to my notebook, which was now half filled with sketches and notes. I hid it under my mattress, not because I thought anyone would snoop, but because it felt like a secret I wasn't supposed to have. One Saturday, I was helping Dad clean out the garage. Mom was at the grocery store, and it was just the two of us, sorting through boxes of old tools and Christmas decorations. Dad was in a good mood, humming some old rock song, tossing me random stuff to stack on shelves. I found a box labeled miscellaneous in Mom's handwriting, full of photo albums and loose pictures. I started flipping through one, mostly baby photos of me. Me in a high chair, me at the park, me asleep in Dad's arms. But then I saw a picture that stopped me cold. It was me, maybe 2 years old, sitting on a man's lap. He had dark hair, slicked back, and a scar above his right eye. My chest tightened. I didn't recognize him, but I knew him. It was the man from my dreams. I must have stared too long because Dad noticed. He came over, glanced at the photo, and his face changed. Not angry, but like he'd been caught. "Where'd you find that?" he asked, taking the album from me. I pointed to the box, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who's that guy?" Dad hesitated, flipping the album shut. "Just an old friend," he said, too quick. "Haven't seen him in years." He shoved the box onto a high shelf, out of my reach, and changed the subject, asking if I wanted to grab burgers for lunch. I nodded, but my mind was racing. Why was Dad acting weird? And why did I have no memory of this guy, even though I was clearly close to him as a toddler? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that photo in my head, the man's arm around me, my tiny hand clutching his shirt. I waited until I heard Dad's snores from down the hall, then snuck back to the garage. The box was too high, so I dragged a stepladder over, my heart pounding like I was breaking into Fort Knox. I pulled the album out and found the photo again. On the back, in faded ink, was written, "Ethan and Ben, Summer '04. Ben." The name hit me like a punch. Was that the B on the mailbox in my dream? I tore through the rest of the album, but there were no other pictures of him. I put everything back, careful to leave no trace, and went to bed, but my brain wouldn't shut off. Who was Ben, and why was he in my nightmares? The next morning, I decided to test the waters. At breakfast, I casually asked Mom if she remembered a guy named Ben from when I was little. She froze, her fork halfway to her mouth, then recovered with a smile. "Ben? Oh, he was around for a bit. Friend of your dad's. Why do you ask?" Her voice was too bright, like she was trying to sell me something. I shrugged, saying I found an old picture, no big deal. Dad shot her a look, quick but heavy, and changed the topic to my upcoming soccer game. I didn't push it, but I knew they were hiding something. The way they clammed up, the way Dad had buried that box. It wasn't just an old friend they'd lost touch with. There was a story here, and they didn't want me to know it. I started paying closer attention to things at home. Little stuff like how Mom always locked the doors at night, even though Millfield was the kind of town where people left their cars running at the gas station. Or how Dad would sometimes stare out the kitchen window at night, like he was expecting someone to show up. I wondered if they were scared of something, or someone. I even started sneaking looks at their old emails on the family computer when they weren't around. But I didn't find anything about Ben. It was like he'd been erased from our lives, except in my dreams. One day, Jake and I were riding our bikes to the creek, and I told him about the photo and my parents' weird reaction. He got quiet, which wasn't like him. "Dude, what if this Ben guy did something bad?" he said, tossing a rock into the water. "Like, maybe he's why you're having those dreams. Maybe your brain's trying to warn you." I laughed it off, but his words stuck. What if Ben wasn't just a memory? What if he was still out there, tied to whatever was haunting me? The thought made my skin crawl, but it also lit a fire in me. I needed answers, even if my parents wouldn't give them. The silence around Ben grew heavier, like a fog settling over our house. I was 12 now, and the dreams were less frequent. Maybe once every 6 months. But they hit harder, like my brain was digging deeper into something I wasn't ready to face. I'd stopped talking to my parents about them. After that breakfast where they brushed off my questions about Ben, I knew they weren't going to tell me anything. It wasn't just that they were hiding something. It was the way they looked at each other, like they were guarding a bomb that could go off if I pushed too hard. I didn't want to upset them, but I couldn't let it go. The dreams, the photo, the footprint under my window, it was all connected, and I was the only one trying to figure out how. I started doing my own detective work. At school, I'd use the library computers to search for Ben Millfield, Ohio, but the results were useless. Random LinkedIn profiles, obituaries for old guys, nothing that matched the man in the photo. I even tried Ben's car accident, hoping to find some news article about a car crash or something, but I got nothing. The internet wasn't much help back then, not like now, and I didn't know where else to look. I thought about asking my grandparents, who lived a couple hours away in Dayton, but they only visited on holidays, and I didn't want to bring it up over the phone. Besides, if Mom and Dad were this cagey, maybe they'd gotten it from their parents. One weekend, Mom asked me to help her sort through some old clothes for a church donation. We were in the basement, surrounded by boxes of stuff we hadn't touched in years. I kept an eye out for anything that might mention Ben. Letters, more photos, anything. While Mom was folding sweaters, I found a small metal lockbox tucked behind a stack of camping gear. It was rusted, with a combination lock I didn't know the code for. I asked Mom what it was, keeping my tone casual. She glanced over, her face tightening for a split second before she smiled. "Oh, just some old paperwork. Nothing exciting." She took it from me and set it on a shelf, then steered me back to the clothes. I didn't buy her excuse. Paperwork doesn't need a lockbox. I made a mental note to come back later, maybe try some random combinations when no one was around. That night, I had the dream again. It started the same. Floating above my bed, the backward clock, the crayon drawings. But this time, the toy car wasn't on the floor or the windowsill. It was on my desk, next to my notebook, like someone had moved it there on purpose. I felt a chill, even in the dream, like I was being watched. When I looked at the window, the man, Ben, I was sure now, wasn't clawing at the glass. He was just standing there, holding something small and shiny. It looked like a key, glinting in the moonlight. He raised it, pointed at the window, and smiled. Not a friendly smile, but one that made my stomach drop. I woke up sweating, my hands shaking. I didn't check the window this time. Couldn't. Instead, I pulled out my notebook and wrote everything down, including the key. Was it real? Was it connected to the lockbox? My head was spinning, but I was too scared to go to the basement and check. The next day, I was jumpy, snapping at Jake when he asked why I was so quiet. I felt bad after, but I couldn't explain it without sounding unhinged. I was starting to feel like I was in one of those horror movies Jake loved, where the kid knows something's wrong but no one believes him. I decided to try talking to Mom again, but this time, I'd be smarter about it. I waited until we were alone washing dishes after dinner. I started small, asking about when I was a baby, what I was like, who used to babysit me. She relaxed, reminiscing about how I'd cry whenever she left for work. Then I slipped in the question, "Did Ben ever watch me when you and Dad were busy?" Her hand froze on a plate, soap suds dripping onto the counter. "Why do you keep bringing him up, Ethan?" she asked, her voice sharp. I mumbled something about the photo, but she cut me off. He was just a friend who helped out sometimes. That's all. Let's not dig up the past. Okay? She turned back to the sink, scrubbing harder than necessary. I knew I'd hit a nerve, but I also knew I'd pushed as far as I could without making things worse. Later, I overheard Mom and Dad talking in their room, their voices low but tense. I pressed my ear to the door, catching fragments. He's asking about Ben again. Doesn't need to know? What if he finds out? My heart sank. Finds out what? I backed away, my mind racing. Whatever happened with Ben wasn't just a falling out. It was something big, something they thought I was too young or too fragile to handle. I went to bed that night feeling more alone than ever, wondering if I'd ever get the truth, or if the dreams were the only way I'd learn it. I turned 13, and the dreams shifted in a way that made my skin crawl. They were rarer now, maybe once or twice a year, but they felt heavier, like my brain was peeling back layers of something I wasn't supposed to see. I'd gotten used to the routine. Floating above my bed, the backward clock, the creepy drawings, the toy car. But the man at the window, Ben, was changing. He wasn't just watching anymore. In the last dream, he'd pressed his hand against the glass, leaving a smudged print, and his lips moved like he was saying my name. I couldn't hear it, but I felt it, like a whisper crawling down my spine. I was half lucid, aware it was a dream, but that didn't stop the panic. I tried to scream, to wake myself up, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the weight of the air. One night in late spring, the dream took a turn that broke me. Everything started the same, ceiling view, ticking clock, red door house drawings taped to my walls. But when I looked at the window, it was open. Not just cracked, but wide open. The curtains flapping in a breeze that smelled like rain and something sour, like rotting leaves. Ben wasn't outside. He was gone. But the open window felt worse, like he'd already crossed some line I couldn't see. I tried to move, to reach my body below, but I was stuck, my limbs heavy like I was drowning in tar. The room got colder, and I heard a sound. A faint creak, like someone stepping on the floorboards. My eyes darted to the door, expecting to see him there, but it was still closed. The creak came again, closer, and I realized it was coming from inside the room, near my bed. I couldn't look down, couldn't see what was below me, but I felt it. A presence, heavy and wrong, like the air was bending around it. I woke up paralyzed, not just scared, but actually paralyzed, my body locked in place while my brain screamed. My room was dark, the clock glowing 3:17 a.m., ticking forward like normal. But I was freezing, my breath visible in the air, like the window really was open. I tried to move my fingers, my toes, anything, but nothing worked. All I could do was stare at the window, half expecting to see Ben's face appear. My mind raced, replaying the dream, the open window, the creak. Was he here? Had he gotten in? The fear was primal, like I was 5 again, hiding under the covers from the monster in the closet. It lasted maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. When I finally twitched my hand, I gasped, bolting upright, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. I didn't check the window, couldn't. Instead, I flicked on every light in my room and sat on the floor, back against the wall, until the sun came up. I didn't sleep again that night. At breakfast, Mom noticed the bags under my eyes and asked if I was okay. I lied, said I'd stayed up playing video games. She didn't push, but I caught her glancing at Dad, that same worried look they'd been trading for years. I wanted to tell them about the dream, about the open window, about how I was starting to think Ben wasn't just a memory. But I didn't. They'd shut me down, like always, and I was tired of their secrets. The next day, I went to Jake's house, needing to get out of my own head. We were in his basement, playing some racing game, when I blurted out the latest dream. I told him everything, the open window, the creak, the paralysis. Jake listened, his controller forgotten in his lap. When I finished, he didn't say anything for a second, just stared at the screen. Dude, he finally said, that's not just a dream. That's like some paranormal shit. You ever think maybe your house is haunted? I laughed, but it came out shaky. Haunted? That was crazy. But the more I thought about it, the less crazy it sounded. The footprint, the lockbox, Ben's photo, none of it added up unless something bigger was going on. Jake suggested we try something dumb like a Ouija board to talk to the ghost. I shut that down fast. I wasn't about to mess with anything that could make this worse. But his words stuck with me. What if it wasn't just Ben? What if something else was using his face, his memory, to get to me? I didn't believe in ghosts, not really, but I was running out of explanations. I started researching online, diving into forums about sleep paralysis and night terrors. I found stories of people seeing shadow figures during paralysis, but none mentioned recurring dreams that stretched back years, or specific details like a scar. One post talked about intrusive memories, where your brain replays trauma you don't consciously remember. That hit too close to home. Was Ben tied to something from when I was too young to remember? Something bad enough to chase me into my dreams? I decided to confront my parents again, but smarter this time. I waited for a quiet evening, when Dad was watching baseball and Mom was reading on the couch. I sat down, pretending to watch the game, then eased into it. Hey, remember that guy Ben? Did something happen with him? Like, something bad? Dad's grip tightened on the remote, and Mom's book froze mid-page. Ethan, we've been over this, Dad said, his voice clipped. He was a friend. Things didn't work out. End of story. I pushed, saying I kept dreaming about him, about stuff that felt real. Mom's face softened, but not in a good way. More like she was scared. They're just dreams, honey, she said. You're growing up, and your brain's processing things. Dad cut in sharper. Drop it, Ethan. You're freaking yourself out over nothing. I backed off, but their reaction told me everything. They weren't just hiding something. They were scared of it too. I was 14 when the dreams started bleeding into real life in a way I couldn't ignore. I'd gotten better at coping, keeping my notebook updated, avoiding late-night horror movies, even playing soft music to drown out the silence before bed. But the weight of it all was still there, like a bruise that never healed. I was spending more time at Jake's house, partly because his place felt normal, free of the tension that hung over mine. His family was loud, chaotic, with his younger sisters always fighting over the TV and his dad grilling burgers in the backyard. It was a good distraction, and Jake never pushed me to talk about the dreams unless I brought them up first. One Friday night in October, Jake's parents were out of town for a wedding, and his sisters were at a sleepover. He invited me and our friend Lucas over for what he called an epic gaming marathon. Lucas was a year older, lanky and quiet, always wearing a hoodie that smelled faintly of weed. We set up in Jake's living room, a mess of pizza boxes and Mountain Dew cans, the Xbox humming as we played through rounds of Halo. By midnight, we were half asleep, sprawled across the couches, the TV casting flickering lights across the room. I didn't have my usual sleep routine, no podcast or thunderstorm sounds to guide my dreams. So I braced myself for something weird. I just didn't expect how bad it would get. I fell asleep on the couch, controller still in my hand, and slipped into a dream that felt too sharp, too real. I was in a forest, dense and dark, the air thick with the smell of wet moss and something metallic, like blood. I was running, branches snapping under my feet, but I didn't know what I was running from. My chest burned, and my legs felt heavy, like I was wading through mud. Then I heard it, a low, rhythmic thump, like a heartbeat, coming from everywhere and nowhere. I stumbled into a clearing and saw the red door house from my nightmares, its windows glowing faintly orange, like a fire was burning inside. The thumping got louder, and I realized it wasn't a heartbeat. It was footsteps, heavy and deliberate, getting closer. I turned, and there was Ben, his scar glinting in the moonlight, holding that shiny key from my last dream. He didn't speak, just pointed at the house, his eyes locked on mine. Then he said, clear as day, "You can't keep running, Ethan." His voice was calm, almost sad, and it cut through me like a knife. I woke up, or thought I did, my heart racing. The living room was dark, the TV off, and Jake and Lucas were snoring softly. But something was wrong. The air felt heavy, like before a storm, and there was a sound. a faint dripping like a faucet left on. It was coming from upstairs, steady and insistent. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, trying to shake off the dream. The dripping didn't stop. It wasn't loud, but it was out of place, and it reminded me of the creak in my last nightmare, the one that felt like something was in my room. I told myself it was nothing, probably a leaky pipe, but my gut was screaming at me to check it out. I grabbed my phone, using its flashlight to navigate the unfamiliar house. Jake's place was old, with creaky floors and peeling wallpaper, and the stairs groaned under my weight. The dripping got louder as I reached the second floor, coming from the bathroom at the end of the hall. The door was half open, and I could see the sink, water spilling over the edge, pooling on the tile. It wasn't just a drip. The faucet was on full blast, like someone had turned it and left. My stomach dropped. Jake was obsessive about turning off lights and faucets to save on bills. There's no way he'd done this. I stepped closer, my flashlight shaking, and noticed something else. The mirror above the sink was fogged up, but not evenly. In the center was a smudge, like a handprint, too big to be mine or Jake's. I froze, my breath catching. The dream flashed back. Ben's voice, the key, the house. Was this connected? I wanted to run, but I couldn't just leave the water running. I reached for the faucet, my hand trembling, and turned it off. The silence was worse than the dripping, heavy and oppressive. Then I heard a floorboard creak behind me. Not loud, but deliberate, like someone shifting their weight. I spun around, shining my light down the hall, but it was empty. My heart was in my throat, and every instinct told me to get out. I backed out of the bathroom, keeping the light on the doorway, and bolted downstairs. I woke Jake, shaking him harder than I meant to. "Dude, something's wrong," I whispered, my voice cracking. I told him about the faucet, the handprint, the creak. He rubbed his eyes, groggy, but the panic in my face must have convinced him. Lucas stirred, mumbling something, but we left him on the couch and crept back upstairs together. Jake grabbed a baseball bat from his room, his jaw tight. When we got to the bathroom, the faucet was off, but the handprint was still there, clearer now, like it had been pressed harder. Jake swore under his breath, gripping the bat. We checked the other rooms, his parents' bedroom, the guest room, even the closets, but found nothing. No open windows, no signs of a break-in. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, watching us. We didn't sleep much after that. Jake tried to laugh it off, saying it was probably his sisters messing with us before they left, but his eyes were nervous. I didn't tell him about the dream, about Ben's voice. I was starting to think I was cursed, like whatever was haunting me followed me wherever I went. The next morning, we checked the bathroom again. The handprint was gone, the mirror clean, like it had never been there. But I knew what I'd seen, and it wasn't just my imagination. By 15, I was starting to think I'd never get answers. The dreams were sporadic now, sometimes months apart, but they left a residue, like smoke you can still smell hours after a fire. I'd grown taller, my voice deeper, but the fear was the same, raw and childish, clawing at me in the dark. I'd stopped asking my parents about Ben, tired of their deflections, but I hadn't stopped searching. I'd sneak into the basement when they were out, trying combinations on that lockbox, but it never opened. I even biked to the county library once, digging through old newspapers for anything about a Ben in Millfield, but all I found were stories about local fairs and high school football. It was like he'd never existed, except in my head. That fall, I started dating Mia, a girl from my history class with a sharp laugh and a habit of stealing my fries at lunch. She lived a few blocks away, in a cul-de-sac where every house had perfect lawns and Halloween decorations up by October. Her parents were cool, the kind who'd let us hang out in her room as long as the door was open. One weekend, they went out of town for a conference, and Mia invited me to stay over. It wasn't a big deal. We'd been together a few months, and her house felt safer than mine, with its bright lights and new furniture. We spent the evening watching old sci-fi movies, her head on my shoulder, the smell of her lavender shampoo calming my nerves. By midnight, we were curled up in her bed, the room dark except for the glow of her phone charging on the nightstand. I didn't expect to dream, Not there, not with her next to me. But I did, and it was the worst one yet. Started with a false awakening, the kind where you think you're awake but you're not. I woke in Mia's room, everything perfect. The posters on her walls, the stuffed bear on her dresser, the faint hum of the AC. But there was a sound, a low thump, like someone dropping a book downstairs. Before I could process it, footsteps started climbing the stairs, fast and heavy. I tried to get up, to lock the door, but my body wouldn't move. Then I saw it. A thin strip of yellow light under the bedroom door, pulsing like it was alive. The footsteps stopped right outside, and the doorknob rattled, slow at first, then frantic. I wanted to scream, to wake Mia, but my voice was gone. The light under the door grew brighter, and a voice started whispering. Not Ben's, but a woman's, soft and venomous. "You can't hide, Ethan," she said. "We know what you did." The words hit like a punch. What I did. I hadn't done anything. But the voice kept going, listing things. Lies I'd told, fights I'd gotten into, moments I wasn't proud of. It was like my conscience had been ripped out and given a megaphone. The door shook, and the light flared, blinding me. I woke again, still in the dream, back in Mia's room. The light still there, the footsteps starting over. It was a loop, each cycle digging deeper, the voice getting personal, accusing me of things I'd buried so deep I barely remembered them. When I finally woke for real, I was soaked in sweat, my heart pounding like I'd run a mile. Mia was asleep, her breathing steady, oblivious to the war in my head. I sat up, trying to calm down, when I saw it. The same yellow light under the door, just like in the dream. My stomach lurched. It didn't make sense. We turned off every light before bed. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, and checked the time. 2:43 a.m. Then I heard it. A creak downstairs, like someone stepping on the hardwood. Not loud, but deliberate, like they were trying not to be heard. I froze, my mind screaming that this was real, not a dream. I nudged Mia, whispering her name, and she stirred, blinking at me. "What's wrong?" she mumbled. I pointed at the door, at the light, and told her I heard something. Her eyes widened, but she stayed calm, grabbing her phone and texting her neighbor. Mr. Harris, a retired cop who'd told her to reach out if anything felt off. We waited, huddled on the bed, listening. The creak came again, closer, like someone was in the hallway. I wanted to check the door, to make sure it was locked, but my legs felt like jelly. Mia clutched my hand, her nails digging into my skin. After what felt like forever, we heard a car pull up outside, then a loud knock on the front door. "Police! Open up!" a voice shouted. Mia let out a shaky breath, and we crept downstairs. Mr. Harris was there with a cop, who said they'd found the back door ajar. The lock jimmied. They searched the house but found no one, just a few muddy footprints in the kitchen that didn't match any of our shoes. The cops said it was probably a burglar, spooked by the lights we'd turned on. But I wasn't so sure. The light under the door, the voice in my dream, it felt too close to everything else, like whatever was after me had followed me to Mia's. The incident at Mia's house shook me more than I wanted to admit. I was 16 now, old enough to know the difference between a random break-in and something that felt personal. The cops had written it off as a burglary gone wrong, but the yellow light under the door, the voice in my dream, they weren't just coincidences. I couldn't talk to Mia about it, not fully. She was rattled but practical, insisting we'd just been unlucky. "It's Millfield, Ethan," she said, squeezing my hand. "People get robbed sometimes." I nodded, but I didn't believe it. The dreams, Ben, the footprints under my window years ago, it was all part of something bigger, something I was still too scared to face. I started avoiding sleepovers, sticking to my own room where I could control the environment. I'd rigged a system, white noise from an old radio, a nightlight to keep the shadows at bay, and a habit of checking the window lock 3 times before bed. But the dreams didn't care. They came when they wanted, sharper now, like they were trying to tell me something urgent. In one, Ben was inside the Red Door house, sitting at a kitchen table, flipping through my notebook. He didn't look at me, just kept reading, his scar twitching as he smirked. "You're close, Ethan," he said. "But you're not ready." I woke up gasping, my notebook still safely under my mattress, but the dream felt like a warning. One night in December, I was at home alone. Mom and Dad were at a holiday party, and I was sprawled on the couch, half watching a basketball game. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every sound. The hum of the fridge, the wind rattling the windows. I was dozing off when I heard a thud outside, like something heavy hitting the ground. I sat up, my pulse spiking. Could have been a branch, a raccoon, anything, but my mind went straight to Ben. I grabbed a flashlight and a kitchen knife, feeling ridiculous but too paranoid to care. I stepped onto the porch, the cold biting my skin, and shone the light around the yard. Nothing. Just snow-dusted grass and the neighbor's Christmas lights blinking in the distance. Then I saw it, tracks in the snow, leading from the street to the side of the house, right under my bedroom window. They were fresh, the edges crisp, too big to be mine or Dad's. My mouth went dry. I followed them, the knife heavy in my hand, my breath clouding in the air. The tracks stopped at the window, where the snow was disturbed, like someone had stood there for a while. I looked up, half expecting to see Ben's face in the glass, but it was just my reflection, pale and scared. I checked the window, it was locked, no scratches, no smudges, but the tracks were real and they didn't lead away. They just stopped like whoever made them had vanished. I went back inside, locking every door, and called Jake. He was at Lucas's, but he heard the panic in my voice and said he'd bike over. While I waited, I sat in the kitchen, the knife on the table, jumping at every creak. Jake showed up 20 minutes later, his cheeks red from the cold. I showed him the tracks and he whistled low. "Dude, this is bad," he said, shining his phone's light on the snow. "You gotta tell your parents." I shook my head. They'd brush it off like always, or worse, they'd freak out and lock me in the house forever. Jake stayed over, crashing on the couch, but neither of us slept much. We kept the lights on, talking about anything to avoid the silence, school, girls, the Cavs' losing streak. The next morning, the tracks were gone, melted or covered by fresh snow. I wanted to believe I'd imagined them, but Jake had seen them too. I decided to confront my parents, not about the tracks, but about Ben one last time. I waited until Sunday dinner, when Mom was serving lasagna, Dad cutting into a loaf of garlic bread. I took a deep breath and said, "I found tracks under my window last night, and I keep dreaming about Ben. I know you're hiding something. Just tell me." The room went still. Mom's fork clattered against her plate, and Dad's jaw tightened. For a second, I thought they'd finally crack, but Mom just sighed. "Ethan, you're letting your imagination run wild," she said, her voice strained. "There's nothing to tell about Ben. He's gone. Let it go." Dad didn't say anything, just stared at his plate, and I knew I'd lost. But I didn't let it go. Couldn't. The tracks, the dreams, the lockbox. It was all screaming at me to keep digging. I started thinking about breaking into that lockbox, maybe using a hammer to smash it open. I didn't care if I got grounded forever. I needed to know what was inside, what my parents were so desperate to hide. The dreams were pushing me toward something, and I was starting to think it wasn't just about Ben. It was about me, about something I'd forgotten, something that was still out there, waiting. The tracks under my window changed everything. I was 17, a junior in high school, juggling AP classes and a part-time job at the local diner. But the dreams and the mystery of Ben were a shadow I couldn't shake. I'd stopped talking to Jake about it. He'd started to look at me like I was obsessed, and I didn't blame him. Mia was still around, but we were fighting more, mostly because I was distant, always half lost in my own head. I couldn't tell her the truth, not without sounding like I'd lost it. The dreams were less frequent, maybe once every 8 months, but they were vivid, like my brain was replaying a movie with new scenes each time. In the last one, Ben was standing in my room, not outside, holding the crayon drawings and tearing them up, piece by piece. "You don't need these anymore," he said, his voice soft but final. I woke up crying, something I hadn't done since I was a kid. I decided to take matters into my own hands. One Saturday, When Mom and Dad were at a neighbor's barbecue, I went to the basement with a crowbar from the garage. The lockbox was still there, rusted but intact, mocking me from the shelf. I wedged the crowbar under the lid, my hands sweaty, and pried until the lock snapped. Inside were papers, bills, a few old letters, and a small envelope with Ethan written on it in Dad's handwriting. My heart stopped. I opened it, expecting answers, but it was just a birthday card from when I was 3, with a note. To our brave boy, love always, Mom and Dad. No mention of Ben, no secrets, just a stupid card. I sat there, the crowbar at my feet, feeling like an idiot. Had I been chasing nothing this whole time? But then I noticed something else. A folded piece of paper at the bottom of the box, yellowed and brittle. It was a restraining order dated 2005 against a Benjamin Holt. My breath caught. Benjamin. Ben. The document listed my parents as the petitioners, claiming he'd been harassing our family, with vague references to unwanted contact and threats. There was no photo, no details about the scar, but it was him. It had to be. I stuffed the paper in my pocket, my mind racing. Why hadn't they told me? What had Ben done to make them go this far? I put the box back, hiding the damage, and went upstairs, the paper burning a hole in my jeans. I didn't confront my parents right away. I needed time to process, to figure out what this meant. At school, I was distracted, flunking a chemistry quiz because I couldn't focus. Mia noticed, cornering me in the cafeteria. "You're scaring me, Ethan," she said, her eyes searching mine. "What's going on?" I wanted to tell her about the restraining order, the dreams, everything, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I snapped, telling her to back off. She walked away, hurt, and I hated myself for it. I was pushing everyone away, but I didn't know how to stop. That night, I Googled Benjamin Holt, Millfield, Ohio, hoping for a lead. I found an old article from 2004 about a local man arrested for drunk driving after a minor accident. No photo, but it mentioned a facial injury from the crash. My stomach twisted. Fit Ben's scar, the timing. The article said he'd moved out of town after the incident, but there was no follow-up. Was he back? Was he the one leaving tracks, turning on faucets, haunting my dreams? I started locking my bedroom door at night, something I hadn't done since I was 10. I even taped a piece of string across my window, low enough to trip anyone trying to climb in. It was paranoid, but it made me feel like I had some control. A few weeks later, I was working a late shift at the diner when I saw him. Or I thought I did. A man came in, late 40s, dark hair slicked back, a faint scar above his right eye. He sat at the counter, ordering coffee, his voice low and familiar. I froze, my hands shaking as I poured. Was it Ben? I couldn't tell. The scar was right, but his face was older, rougher than the one in my dreams. He didn't look at me, just sipped his coffee and left a tip before walking out. I stood there, my apron soaked with sweat, wondering if I'd imagined it. I didn't tell anyone, not even Jake, but I started carrying a pocket knife, just in case. The dreams kept coming, but they were different now. Less about Ben and more about the Red Door house. In one, I was inside, walking through empty rooms, the walls covered in those crayon drawings. The air was thick, like I was breathing syrup, and I could hear someone humming, a tune I didn't recognize but felt I should. I woke up with the melody stuck in my head, humming it under my breath at school until Mia asked what it was. I brushed it off, but it scared me. Why was my brain pulling up songs I didn't know? Was it Ben, or something deeper? Something I'd buried so long ago it was only coming out now? I was 18, a senior, ready to leave Millfield for college and put the dreams behind me. But they weren't done with me. The restraining order, the man at the diner, the humming. It was all building to something, and I could feel it like a storm rolling in. I'd patched things up with Mia, promising to be more open, but I still kept the truth locked away. I didn't want to drag her into my mess. Jake was applying to schools out of state, and I felt him pulling away, our talks about the dreams replaced by college plans and part-time jobs. I was alone again, just me and the shadow of Ben or whatever he was. The dreams had changed. They weren't just about the Red Door house or Ben anymore. Now, I was in a field, endless and gray, with voices whispering all around me. Not accusing, like at Mia's, but pleading, saying things like, "Find us and don't forget." I'd wake up with my throat tight, like I'd been crying in my sleep. I stopped writing in my notebook, afraid that putting it on paper would make it more real. But I couldn't stop the questions. Who were us? Was it the stick figures from the drawings, the family I didn't remember? And why did it feel like I was running out of time? One night in April, I was studying for finals when I heard a tap at my window. It was soft, almost like a branch, but too rhythmic. I froze, my pencil hovering over my notes. The string I'd taped across the window was still there, unbroken, but the tapping kept going, steady and deliberate. I grabbed my knife, my hands shaking, and crept to the window. The street was empty, the neighbor's porch light casting long shadows across the lawn. But there, on the glass, was a smudge, like a fingerprint, fresh and clear. I backed away, my breath shallow, and called Dad. He was in the living room, watching the news, and came upstairs, his face annoyed until he saw the smudge. "Probably just dirt," he said, but his voice was tight. He wiped it away with his sleeve, checked the lock, and told me to get some sleep. I didn't tell him about the tapping. I didn't trust him to believe me. The next day, I went back to the library, desperate for anything on Benjamin Holt. I found a new lead, an old court record from 2006, mentioning a dismissed case against him for stalking. No details, just a note that the charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. My parents' names weren't listed, but the timing fit. I printed it out, my hands trembling. Was this why they were so scared? Had Ben been stalking us, even after the restraining order? I wanted to confront them, but I knew they'd shut me down. Instead, I started watching the house at night, sitting by my window with the lights off, waiting for the tapping to come back. It didn't, but I found more smudges, always faint, always gone by morning. The final dream came a week before graduation. I was in the Red Door house, but it was different, decayed, the walls crumbling, the crayon drawings faded to smears. Ben was there, but he wasn't threatening. He looked tired, his scar barely visible, like he was fading too. "It's time," he said, handing me the key. "Open it." I took it, my hand steady for the first time, and walked to a door I hadn't seen before, rusted and heavy. I turned the key, and the door swung open, revealing nothing but darkness. The voices from the field were there, louder now, saying, "You found us." I stepped forward and woke up. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat on my bed, the key's weight still in my hand, even though it was just a dream. I realized something: Ben wasn't the enemy. He was a messenger, a piece of my past trying to break through. The us was my family, or maybe just me, the part I'd lost when I was too young to remember. I didn't know what happened with Ben, what he'd done, or why my parents cut him out, but I knew it wasn't just about him. It was about trust, about the secrets that had shaped me without my knowing. I never found the Red Door house, never saw Ben again, in dreams or otherwise. The smudges stopped, the tapping faded, and I left Millfield for college, carrying the questions with me. I'm still piecing it together, but I've made peace with not knowing everything. Some stories don't have neat endings, and that's okay. Thanks for listening, everyone. This one's been heavy, but sharing it helps. Stay safe out there, and I'll catch you next time.